Radiohead are well known for crafting complex yet beautiful and accessible music. I could probably do a whole series talking about different elements of Radiohead, but what I'm going to do today is talk about how modes have been used in Radiohead's music. So let's start with one of Radiohead's more straightforward songs, Lucky from OK Computer. So Lucky begins in E Aeolian, which is the same thing as E natural minor. So we're basically just an E minor for the first verse with a normal minor fill. But then when we hit the chorus, we suddenly change into an E Dorian fill. The chorus gives us a 1 to 4 progression, but instead of staying in Aeolian, which would give us E minor to A minor, we instead get E minor to A major, which has swapped our C naturals for C sharp, giving us a Dorian scale, a Dorian sound. So Dorian is exactly the same as the natural minor scale, which is sometimes called the Aeolian mode, apart from the 6th degree. The 6th degree in the Dorian scale is raised. So when we land on this A major chord in the chorus and Tom sings that big C sharp, emphasising the Dorian change, the song suddenly opens up. The chorus seems to have lifted up because our ears are expecting a C natural and a minor fill. So then the chorus goes back and forth from E minor to A major, but then as the chorus comes to an end, we get C7, bringing us back down to earth with a C natural, preparing us to return to the verse, which is once again in natural minor. So to give you an idea of the impact this Dorian scale was having, if I turn all the C sharps into C naturals and swap the A major chords for A minor, you can hear what Lucky's chorus would sound like if it wasn't in Dorian but was in the normal natural minor scale. So it no longer sounds so exciting, it doesn't have that uplifting, rising sense, and instead it just feels quite depressed, just like the verse did. We lose that jump up and that unexpected change and instead get a very melancholic pair of chords instead. Radiohead used the Dorian mode a lot in their music. Let's look at an example from over 10 years later from Lotus Flower from The King of Limbs. I will shape myself into your pocket. So the verse of Lotus Flower actually features the same Dorian chord progression that Lucky's chorus did, albeit in a different key. The verse just moves back and forth from the minor tonic chord D minor to the major version of the 4 chord G major. And once again, just like he did in Lucky, Tom's vocal marks the chromatic Dorian note, in this case the B natural, which really hits home the Dorian sound and brings it to the forefront. So just like I did with Lucky, let's remove the Dorian feel from this verse and take it back to a natural minor place by changing the B naturals to B flats and the G major to G minor. So like we heard before with Lucky, it's instantly sounding a lot more minor key. It's sounding more depressing and less uplifting. To me, the melody now sounds a lot less loose-footed. It feels more functional now, like it's being pulled towards the 1 and the 5. Basically, because the B flat, the 6th degree of our natural minor scale, is only a semitone away from the A, which is the 5th degree, we feel this tension. The B flat wants to resolve down to the 5, the A. When you change something to a Dorian mode, you're moving that 6 up away from the 5. You're making it a tone away from the A instead of just a semitone. And that can make all the difference. It can make that 6 feel a lot more steady. It makes it feel like when you rest on that 6th note, it doesn't necessarily want to resolve downwards now to the 5. And I think this is one of the key elements that gives Lotus Flower its free-floating feel. Another example of Dorian from Radiohead is 15 Step from In Rainbows, but this time it's a little bit more subtle because the Dorian feel is only in the chords and not in the vocal melody. So the vocal melody for 15 Step begins accompanied only by percussion. In other words, we have no instruments playing chords, so our only sense of harmony or key comes from the notes that Thom Yorke is singing. And this is where it gets really interesting because Tom is singing using the minor pentatonic scale. Now the minor pentatonic scale is exactly the same as a normal minor scale, as a natural minor or Aeolian scale. However, it differs in one key way. It's missing 2 of the notes. It's missing the 2nd degree and the 6th degree. And it's the 6th degree here which is the important bit, because the only difference between a natural minor scale and a Dorian scale is the 6th degree. So because Tom is singing in this minor pentatonic scale, we're never going to hear that 6th note that confirms to our ears whether we are hearing a Dorian sound or an Aeolian sound. It's sort of staying ambiguous. So when we're hearing this pentatonic intro without any accompaniment, I think our ears are going to naturally focus towards the natural minor scale, hearing what Tom is singing against a natural minor sound. It's only when the chords then come in at the end of the intro that we suddenly realise we're in a Dorian mode, and it recontextualises the rest of the song. If the chords had come in from the very beginning of the song, we would have heard that initial intro in a Dorian sound. Instead, by having the chords come in afterwards, we can hear this intro in an ambiguous minor space, and then the rest of the song can exist in a Dorian space. But just in case you're interested in hearing what that would sound like, here's the vocal intro again with a Dorian chord progression underneath. So let's look at something that's not Dorian. Let's look at Airbag from OK Computer, which has a verse that uses the Lydian mode. So the Lydian mode is exactly the same as the major scale, but the 4th degree has been sharpened. Just like in 15 Step, the vocal melody in Airbag's verse doesn't actually go Lydian at all, it stays completely diatonic. What happens is it's actually the chords underneath that recontextualizes what Tom's singing and gives it a Lydian sound temporarily. So the verse starts on a diatonic A add 9 chord, and Tom sings this simple 3-note motif. We then get the same 3-note motif, but now the chord has gone down to this A add sharp 11. The sharp 11 is a D sharp, and as we're in A major, that's a sharpened version of the 4th note, giving us a Lydian sound. So just by changing the chord underneath the melody, we can now hear the same 3-note motif in a very different context. The D sharp then quickly descends down to a normal D, relieving the Lydian sound and taking us back to a normal major territory. Adding this D sharp here doesn't just give the verse a nice Lydian flavour, it also creates a lovely chromatic line cliche down through the chord progression. The first chord having this E, and then we descend onto the D sharp, then the D, and then finally back to a C sharp. So we've created this lovely walking line down between all of the chords. Let's look at something slightly more interesting. Let's look at everything in its right place, which uses something called modal interchange. Now, modal interchange is when a song's tonality borrows chords from parallel modes to get interesting sounds and swap between tonalities. So let's look at how modal interchange is used in everything in its right place. So the pattern begins on an F major and then moves to a C major. So at this point we feel fairly solidly in F major with a 1 chord and then a 5 chord. But then we get a lovely chromatic shift with this D flat major 13 chord. This chord is borrowed from the parallel minor key, otherwise known as Aeolian. And the next chord, the C minor / E flat, is also Aeolian. So basically the first half of the progression is in major and the second half is in minor or Aeolian. Now after a few rotations of this progression we lose the F major and now we're left with just the C taking up the whole bar. And even though this C is a major chord, losing the F major chord actually pulls us closer to the minor side of things, as it was the F major in the progression that was keeping us tied to a major sound. So the last example we're going to look at today is from Radiohead's most recent album, Moonshaped Pool, and it's Burn the Witch. So Burn the Witch begins with this repeated F sharp 6/9 chord, so our ears are instantly pulled towards an F sharp major sound. But then we move to this E major chord, and E major doesn't belong in F sharp. E major is the flat version of the 7 chord. So the entrance of this E major chord gives us a Mixolydian sound because the E is a flat 7 to the F sharp, and a major scale with a flat 7 is a Mixolydian mode. Now the verse effectively vamps back and forth from this F sharp chord to this E chord, really hitting home this Mixolydian sound. However, later when we hit the chorus, things change again. We go from using full major chords to using 5 chords, so we've lost the 3rd in the chord, so we're no longer necessarily in F sharp major. And this is hit home when we get this D chord. D doesn't belong in F sharp and it doesn't belong in F sharp Mixolydian. What's happening here is modal interchange again. So the D is borrowed from the natural minor scale or the Aeolian mode, so it starts pulling us in a minor direction. And this is hit home when we get this A chord, which also doesn't belong in F sharp major and does belong in F sharp minor. The vocal line also starts singing this A natural, which is the minor third from F sharp, so it really hits home that we're now in the minor version of F sharp instead of the major version we had before. So when we hit this Aeolian mode for the chorus, the song suddenly feels very uneasy because we've now descended into a minor key, into a minor place, which really plays into the theme of the song. So there are just a few examples of modes in Radiohead songs. There really were so many options to choose from. Unlike when I did the modes video for the Beatles, where I really had to search for some examples, Radiohead have ample. But that said, if you can think of any other examples of modes in Radiohead songs, or any other artists that use modes really extensively, do leave a comment below.
Music basically is like mathematics, you know, you're trying to form patterns that make you understand what is around you, and patterns that help you get through the next day.